Okay, this video on the dark, so bear with me. The title of this video is called Payback. Now, why I'm dubbing this video Payback? And, I got to give a shout out once again to my brother BGS, Ed Moore, and a few other brothers that mentioned this and talked about this, but for some reason, nobody liked to discuss this. Discuss this in black, in the black community or in black intellectual spaces, especially when it pertains to black enslavement here in our sojourn here in America. Nobody never liked to talk about this because some reason this is a sensitive talking point, and this also shed the light on the relationship between black men and black women and how this relationship was really set up to the way it is now. And it goes pretty much back into the later part of this country's history when it pertains to black people being enslaved. Now, for what they tell you, a lot of these people, I always heard a lot of white people will come out, white men in particular, they will always do this rambling when you talk about reparations. They will always talk about how you had black slave owners. And also these black slave owners should be held responsible. Certain black families, especially in the areas of Virginia and North Carolina, South Carolina, they should be held accountable as well, provided if those families are still wealthy, which they are not. So what he brought up and mentioned that you had black people that owned slaves. True. You did have a slave-owning class of black people in the southern colonies that owned slaves. No doubt about it. Yes, that's one thing. Yes, he's right. That white man right about that. But what he ain't telling you is, he's not telling you the full story. See, when you go digging up this shit, thanks to BGS, and a few other brothers that talked about this, especially in red pill and black pill spaces, including my brother General Tito. I gotta give him a shout out on this, cause he's been, I don't know where he at. I guess they got him off YouTube, but I hope he come back anytime they let Cynthia G come back. So you have this whole idea of black people owning slaves, and a lot of white men run with that shit. They say, this is the reason why we should have to pay reparations. Well, we don't have to even use reparations. I mean, we don't even have to use slavery for the shit that happened to us. There's shit that happened after slavery, like I said, like many other black people that are in academia that study history have explained. But see, this is another thing they ain't gonna tell y'all. See, if you ever go back and look at that movie 12 Years as a Slave, where you had Lapita, she used to go and visit because the black women were the only ones that could travel between plantations. A lot of black women that were slaves, did have a lot more freedom than black men have, because they didn't live a fear of black women running away. They always knew black women was gonna come back, because black women were pretty much taken care of on the plantation more so than the men. The men were the labor force. The women were mostly, if they were attractive black women, they would mostly be pleasuring women and shit like that, housemaids and shit. They didn't do all of the back breaking labor like they want y'all to believe in all these slave movies. And a lot of times, black women wasn't even getting slave broken. They were breaking mostly the men. That's why you couldn't find pictures of women with whips all across their backs and shit like that. You didn't find that amongst black women because black women were way more docile, and a lot of times they made the black women the leadership on the plantation. That's why you have black women on the leadership in the black community today due to that. They put the black woman in charge of the black community, and that goes all the way back to slavery. That's why with BGS and all of us said we never had a patriarchy in the black community. We had a controlled gynocracy in the black community that was controlled by a white male patriarchy. So when you go look back, and I was looking at all this shit, man, and then looking at all these black women that were married to white planters in the South, and how these women, not only if they had numerous biracial kids that were sold off into slavery, they could pretty much be free women. And a lot of them free black women married white husbands and shit. And they had biracial children. Some of them was left with the inheritance of their white fathers. So you had black planters, that the biracial descendants of the white planters that owned a lot of the slaves and land down in like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, parts of Georgia, and they were pretty much prominent black families. Some of them even married other blacks and became prominent black families. But after the Civil War, a lot of them lost all their wealth after the Civil War due to the fact that Abraham Lincoln promised the whites who fought in the Confederacy, because this is what they not gonna tell y'all. Both your Southerners, your poor Southerners, they did not fight for the Confederacy. This is another lie that they tell y'all, that a lot of the Southern poor people fought for the Confederacy. No, they didn't. They fought for the Union because they didn't have no jobs. And what happened was the Abraham Lincoln and the other unions told them if they fight for the Confederacy, for the Union, they would be promised to get land and shit. So they fought. And then on top of that, they was getting their ass whooped by a lot of the black slaves who fought for their slave masters. Yes, they was getting their ass whooped. The poor white boys was getting their ass whooped by black Confederate soldiers that were fought for the Confederacy. But they ain't gonna tell y'all this. That's why I do gotta give a shout out to people like Charleston White who mentioned this. That's why you have a lot of black people that have a Confederate flag. This is what they not gonna tell y'all. But anyway, you had black women that owned slaves, and after the Civil War, a lot of them lost their prestige. Well, a lot of them women, they had a lot of wealth, and the children of those slave masters had a lot of wealth, like your E.D. Du Bois's, your Booker T. Washington's. They had a lot of wealth. So some of them founded your what? HBCUs. They founded your HBCU universities. Yes, they ain't gonna talk about this shit. But like I said, they always have put the black woman in the head of the community as the leadership. Now, when we tried to establish a patriarchy pretty much during Reconstruction, and if you notice, black men, we started doing well right out the gate. We started doing well and took control over our communities, or even so much for a time during, the Jim Crow era, during from the 20s, when you had black soldiers that were fighting in the trench warfare of World War I, went over to fought in all the battles and came back, with a little money coin in their pocket. So a lot of them started building communities, thriving communities, like you got your Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You had Elaine, Arkansas. You had Wilmington, North Carolina. You had Slocum, Texas. You had Omaha, Nebraska. You had all these black thriving towns that were started by what? Black men. So white men got resentful and jealous of that. And anytime these black towns that were controlled by black men that were thriving black communities, they would burn them down, find a reason to burn them and destroy these towns and shit like that. So every time we try to repeat that cycle, the white man will come and fuck it up, throw a stumbling block to fuck it up every time. So they said they made a deal with the black women, saying, look, we got to put the black women in control because we can control the black women. So that's what they did. And like I said, you had white men laying up with black women not only doing slavery, but all the way through all the way through Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and all that shit. But see, I'm gonna show y'all something. Guess who was paying attention to this shit? Guess who was paying attention to this shit? That's right, that white woman. See, that white woman was laying back in the cut paying attention to this shit that Brad and Keisha, this relationship that Brad and Keisha had going on. And they told Becky, oh, you can't go and get you a black man to marry. They told Keisha for years, if Tyrone got so much as caught looking at Becky and Susan, he got lynched so high, they turned the skin, the pocketbook, burnt them into oil. He didn't even have to look at a white woman. Just the notion of him doing that persisted all the way through slavery, all the way through Jim Crow. That's how you had Emmett Till killed. That's how you had a lot of black men killed. But see, what they ain't gonna tell y'all, that Keisha also had a lot of black men killed, because all she had to do was accuse him of having sex with a white woman and he would get lynched up. That's why you have black women able to call the police and have black men killed. So this shows you right here that black women still use the slave catchers to come out and do their dirty work. But see, what they ain't gonna tell y'all is Becky and Susan back then was paying attention, just like white women pay attention to now. Y'all black women and white men, how they operate with each other. How y'all had this secret relationship. How the white man told Becky and Susan, oh, you can't get with no black man. Now you see the payback is, I'm gonna show you what the payback is for y'all Keishas. The NBA draft and the NFL draft, where you see all your black men who are of prominent class getting with white women and not with you. See, y'all black women, y'all will pass up all the blue collar brothers that have regular jobs because they ain't making enough. They ain't making enough. They dusty. Becky said, fuck it, I'll take them. And what Becky do and Susan do, they take them, and the brothers even do better, so much better that they start building shit with Becky and Susan. So you black women look and be saying, the first thing y'all always do is say, look at all these niggas with these white women. They don't like us. What happened is now, yes, y'all black women will get with white men, but most of the white men just taking y'all to Pound Town. They ain't married y'all. Y'all provide the same primary sexual entertainment for white men that y'all did back in the day. That's why I told Crystal Cousin, you ain't doing nothing but hooking black women up to be exploited. But I digress. See, Becky and Susan, this is payback for them. That's why Becky and Susan, they can flip Brad and Chad off and give them the middle finger and say, what about y'all laying up with all these black women to create biracial kids? Which you do have a lot of that going on. White men, they just cover it up more. See, white men and black women have their shit covered up where it look as though you have mostly white men with black men with white women. Yes, they marry, black tend to marry more than black women and white men. Wonder why? Wonder why? Why is that? Why is, even though black women are leading and having children out of wedlock, but why most of us not by black men and by most of us by non-black men? And I told Sarge Willie P, you got to point that out. You can't go without pointing that out, that when you find out that black women have more children by non-black men, mostly white men, when you find that out, and that they have more children out of wedlock with non-black men and the men don't have no children, then you start to see a pattern. So why is any reason for black men to stay around when you got a group of women that just look at him for something financial or economic he can bring to him, or something sexual? And if he ain't making enough money, he a regular blue collar guy, you don't want him anyway. Only way you want that brother is that brother running a basketball or football down the field, but Becky snatching him up. And there's not no other group of men marrying you black women in high numbers. Yeah, the white men, the Hispanic men, the Arab men laying up with y'all, but they ain't trying to be married to y'all. You see, these stats coming out. And see, this is the payback. See, Becky, not so much as Tyrone. Tyrone just doing, black brothers just doing what they do. We ain't trying to pay nobody back. But however, that's why I dubbed this video Becky's and Susan's Payback.